Why does the princess look sad, Daddy? The little girl's voice was small, almost hesitant, as she tugged at his hand, pointing at a painting in the corner of the quiet museum gallery. The artwork was a grand portrait of a princess, her gown shimmering in gold and sapphire, but her expression was heavy, almost broken. The single dad knelt beside his daughter, brushing a stray curl from her forehead. He could see the curiosity in her eyes, but also a tiny flicker of worry, the way children sometimes absorb sorrow without even knowing why. "Well, maybe she's waiting for someone," he said softly. "Someone to help her, someone to make her smile again." The girl's brow furrowed. "But no one's coming," she whispered. Her words landed on him like a gentle, impossible truth. She was only 6, yet somehow she already understood the ache of waiting. He glanced at the painting again. There it was, the princess's eyes, staring into nothing, filled with longing. It struck him that sometimes life isn't much different from art. People can look so perfectly composed on the outside while carrying a storm inside. Then something inside him clicked. He reached into his bag and pulled out a crumpled sketch pad and a worn pencil. They weren't much, just the remnants of his old hobby from years ago. But he remembered how drawing used to make him feel, like he could reach into a blank space and create something better, even if only for a moment. "Here," he said, flipping the pad open. "Why don't we help her?" The girl's eyes widened. "Help her?" "Yes," he smiled. "We'll draw a friend for the princess. Someone who can make her happy again." The little girl's lips curved into a tentative smile. Together, they bent over the sketch pad, pencils scratching, erasing, and redrawing. Minutes passed, but it felt like hours. And slowly, the princess in the sketch began to change. Her frown softened. A tiny sparkle appeared in her eyes. A little figure, a companion, a friend, maybe a knight, stood beside her, holding out a hand. When the dad finally handed the sketch pad to his daughter, her reaction was instantaneous. Her eyes lit up. "Daddy, you made her happy." He laughed softly, his chest warming in a way it hadn't for a long time. The sound of her laughter, pure and unfiltered, echoed through the gallery. Other visitors glanced over, curious at the sight of a man and his daughter, hunched over a sketchpad, yet so engrossed they didn't even notice anyone else. "Do you think she needed a hug?" the girl asked, tilting her head. "Maybe," he said. "Sometimes that's all anyone needs." The little girl reached out and pressed her hand to the drawing, as if she could feel the princess's joy through the paper. And in that moment, he realized something profound. Happiness, like art, could be contagious. Small gestures could ripple outward, touching lives in ways people didn't always notice. He remembered the nights when he had felt trapped, working late shifts, struggling to pay bills, wondering if he was doing enough for his daughter. Those fears seemed distant here, irrelevant against the light in her eyes. Because sometimes the world isn't about solving everything. Sometimes it's about making one small corner of it better, even if only for a moment. "Daddy, can we show her to the others?" she asked eagerly, pointing to the other children and families wandering past. He nodded, standing and holding the sketchpad high. Together, they walked through the gallery, showing the princess to strangers. People smiled, some even leaning down to praise the little girl's effort. And as they watched, the dad noticed something remarkable. The princess's sadness no longer seemed permanent. With every shared smile, she became lighter, freer. In a way, the little girl had saved her. Later, as they sat in the museum cafe sipping hot chocolate, the girl curled into his side. "Daddy, can we do this again tomorrow?" He kissed the top of her head. "Absolutely. We'll help 100 more princesses if we have to." The little girl giggled, her eyes sparkling. And in that quiet moment, he realized that life's real magic wasn't in grand gestures or fairy tales. It was in showing up, in noticing the sadness, and in choosing to do something, no matter how small, to change it. And for the first time in a long time, he felt like he could do that, not just for a princess on paper, but for his daughter, for himself, and maybe, just maybe, for the world. The next morning, the little girl bounced into the kitchen before the sun was even up. "Daddy, Daddy." Can we help another princess today? She squealed, her tiny feet slapping against the hardwood floor. He laughed, wiping sleep from his eyes. Another princess, huh? I guess we better grab our pencils and magic sketchpad. She giggled, tugging his hand toward the car. He followed, still half asleep but fully aware that something extraordinary had begun yesterday, and it wasn't just a game. They arrived at the local children's hospital, a place that always made him nervous. The sterile smell of antiseptic, the beeping of monitors, and the quiet, anxious families reminded him of how fragile life could be. But the little girl didn't hesitate. She held his hand tight and marched forward like a tiny hero with a mission. They were greeted by a nurse with a kind smile. "Hello there. Are you here to see someone special?" "Kind of," the girl said, her voice confident. "We're here to help the princesses." The dad raised an eyebrow. "Princesses?" She nodded vigorously. "All of them. Some are sad. We're going to make them happy." The nurse's eyes softened. "Well, I think you just might be exactly what we need." They were led to a small playroom, where children sat quietly, some in wheelchairs, others perched on small chairs, eyes fixed on the floor. He felt a pang in his chest. Life could be so unfair. And yet, here they were, ready to do something small but meaningful. He knelt beside his daughter again. "Okay, think about what would make them smile." She tapped her chin. "A friend. Every princess needs a friend." They opened the sketchpad. The dad's hands were steadier now, more confident, as they began to draw. But as they worked, he noticed the eyes of the children slowly lift, curiosity replacing sadness. One by one, they leaned in, peering over his shoulder, fascinated by the pencil strokes that brought imaginary friends to life. A little boy with bandaged arms whispered, "Can you draw one for me too?" The girl nodded fiercely. "Of course. You're Prince, right? Princes need friends too." By mid-morning, the small table was covered in sketches, princesses smiling, knights holding hands, animals dancing, and imaginary worlds full of laughter. And the room, once quiet and tense, was now alive with giggles and chatter. A nurse peeked in and whispered to him, "You don't know how much this means. Many of these kids haven't smiled in days, sometimes weeks." He swallowed hard, suddenly realizing that their little project had become more than a game. It was hope, a small spark of joy that could pierce through pain. Then, something happened that made him freeze. A little girl with bright red hair sat in the corner, hugging her knees. Her hospital gown was crisp and white, her eyes filled with something heavier than sadness, fear. His daughter immediately noticed her and whispered, "Daddy, she needs help the most." He nodded. "Then she's our princess today." Together, they approached her, showing her the sketches. The girl hesitated at first, but the little daughter's warm smile and the dad's gentle encouragement finally broke through. She reached out slowly, her fingers brushing the paper, and for the first time, her lips curved into a tiny, uncertain smile. "That's beautiful," she whispered. The dad felt a lump in his throat. One small smile, one tiny spark, and the whole room seemed lighter. Other children started showing their own drawings, encouraging her, and the red-haired girl's smile grew with every passing second. By the time they left, the hospital room was buzzing with a different energy. The children waved and called out thanks, their laughter echoing down the hall. The little girl held her father's hand tightly, her eyes shining with pride. "Daddy," she said softly in the car, "we made them happy, just like yesterday." "Yes, we did," he replied, his voice thick. "And you know what? You taught me something important. Happiness doesn't have to be huge or perfect. Even the smallest things, a smile, a drawing, a little time, can change someone's whole day." As they drove home, he couldn't stop thinking about the red-haired girl. There was something about the way her fear had slowly transformed into trust, how the smallest gesture had cracked open a door she hadn't dared to open. He realized, with a quiet awe, that this wasn't just about princesses or sketches. It was about noticing someone's sadness and having the courage to step in when no one else would. And as his daughter drifted off to sleep in the back seat, clutching her sketch pad, he knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning. Somewhere out there, another princess was waiting. And tomorrow, they would go find her. The next morning, the dad woke to the sound of tiny footsteps racing across the living room. "Daddy, wake up. Wake up. I had an idea." He rubbed his eyes and smiled, already knowing it would be something extraordinary. "An idea, huh? Let me hear it." She waved her sketchpad dramatically. "We don't have to just draw princesses in pictures. We can find real princesses. Real kids who need help." He froze. "Real kids." She nodded so eagerly, he couldn't help but smile.
"Yes.
"Like yesterday at the hospital.
There are so many sad kids out there.
We can make them happy too." He hesitated, thinking about work, bills, responsibilities, life's constant weight. But when he saw her shining eyes, he knew there was no arguing. Sometimes the world called for action, no matter how inconvenient or scary it seemed. By mid-morning, they were on their way to the local community center, a bustling place where children from all walks of life gathered. The center was crowded, filled with laughter, but also with kids who carried invisible burdens. He noticed the boy slouched on the bench, staring at the floor, the girl clutching a worn stuffed animal, the twins whispering anxiously to each other. His daughter pulled him forward. "There. That one. He's a princess, too." He followed her gaze to a boy sitting alone, shoulders hunched, eyes avoiding everyone around him. There was no obvious sign of distress, but the weight in his posture spoke volumes. "All right," the dad said, kneeling beside the boy. "We're here to help. Can we sit with you?" The boy shrugged, eyes darting to the door as if escape was the only option. The dad didn't push. Instead, he opened the sketchpad, showing the boy some of the princesses and knights they had drawn. At first, the boy didn't react. He barely glanced at the drawings, arms folded. But then, the little girl sat next to him, nudging him gently. "You need a friend," she said simply. Something shifted. The boy's eyes softened. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, he leaned in to look closer at the sketches. His lips twitched. Was that a smile? The dad took a deep breath. "You can help us. Draw your own princess. Or knight. Or whatever makes you happy." For a moment, silence. Then, with shaky hands, the boy took the pencil. The dad watched as the first lines appeared on the page, tentative but deliberate. The little girl whispered encouragement, pointing at colors, ideas, shapes. And slowly, the boy's posture straightened. By the time they were done, he had created a detailed scene, a castle surrounded by forests, a brave knight holding hands with a smiling princess, the sky painted in vibrant oranges and pinks. He looked up, eyes meeting the dad's. I made her happy," he whispered. "Yes," the dad said softly, feeling a lump in his throat. "You did. You helped her and you helped yourself too." The boy's small smile widened as he looked at his creation. Around them, other children noticed and began creating their own drawings, inspired by the first. Laughter echoed through the room, a sound so genuine it made the adults stop and watch in awe. But then, as the dad turned to hand the sketchpad to another child, he noticed something alarming, a commotion at the door. A security guard had arrived, looking stern. "Excuse me, sir. Some of the children here are asking questions they shouldn't be asking about outside events, and there's a concern about a group wandering off." The dad felt a pang of panic. He realized their mission, while well-intentioned, was drawing attention in ways he hadn't anticipated. If they weren't careful, what had started as innocent fun could quickly spiral into chaos. He knelt beside his daughter and whispered, "We have to be smart. We still want to help, but we need to keep everyone safe." She nodded, understanding immediately. "We can do that, Daddy. We'll still make the princesses happy, but quietly." So they adjusted their plan. Instead of wandering freely, they stayed within the center, encouraging the children to create in one small room. They helped guide shy kids, offered pencils and paper, and gently reminded the more anxious ones that it was okay to imagine, to smile, and to dream. By the end of the day, the little girl leaned against her father, exhausted but glowing. "Daddy, look at them. All the princesses are happy now. He looked around at the room, once tense and quiet, now filled with vibrant drawings and bright laughter. Each child had contributed, each one transformed in some small way. And in that moment, he realized that their mission wasn't just about happiness, it was about empowerment. The children weren't just recipients of kindness, they were creators, capable of shaping their own joy. As they walked out, the dad felt a mix of pride and humility. The world was messy, chaotic, sometimes even harsh, but small acts, persistent and patient, could leave real, lasting change. And his daughter, with her unshakable belief in goodness, had shown him that sometimes the most powerful magic wasn't in fairy tales, it was in the hearts of those who dared to care. But just as they were about to leave, the little girl tugged his hand again, eyes wide with urgency. "Daddy, there's one more princess we have to find. She's waiting for us." And with that, he knew their journey was far from over. Somewhere, another child, another princess, needed them. The morning sun filtered through the curtains, painting the living room gold, but there was no time to admire it.
Daddy.
"We have to hurry," the little girl shouted, practically bouncing on her tiptoes. He rubbed his eyes and smiled, knowing better than to ask questions. She had a plan, as always, and he had learned that following her lead usually meant something extraordinary was about to happen. "Where are we going today?" he asked, tying his shoes. "You'll see," she said mysteriously, dragging him out the door. By mid-morning, they were at the city library, a place teeming with quiet energy and hushed conversations. But it wasn't the books that caught their attention. Sitting in a corner, barely visible among the stacks, was a girl no older than his daughter. She had her face buried in her arms, rocking slightly back and forth. The dad knelt down beside his daughter. "She looks really sad, doesn't she?" The girl nodded solemnly. "This princess needs us more than any other one. Look at her, Daddy. She's alone." He felt a pang in his chest. There was something raw, almost haunting, about the little girl's posture. Unlike the other children they had helped, this one didn't even look up. She seemed locked inside herself, as if the world had already passed her by. "All right," he whispered. "Let's do this carefully." They approached slowly. The dad opened his sketchpad, hoping to catch her interest. "Hi there," he said gently. "We're drawing princesses and friends. Want to join us?" The girl didn't respond. Her body stayed curled in a protective shell, her eyes hidden. The dad felt a familiar sting of frustration and worry. The other children had been easier. They had smiles ready to share. But not this one. Not yet. He glanced at his daughter, who was kneeling beside the girl, offering a colored pencil without a word. "It's okay," she whispered softly. "You don't have to be scared. We just want to help." Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the girl raised her head. Her eyes were wide, haunted, and suspicious. "Why?" she asked in a tiny voice. "Because everyone deserves a little happiness," the dad replied, keeping his tone gentle. "Even princesses who feel like no one notices them." Something in his words seemed to reach her. She hesitated, then took the pencil. A tiny line appeared on the paper, one shaky stroke almost trembling, but it was enough. The dad and his daughter watched quietly, giving her space while remaining close. Minutes passed. Slowly, her strokes grew more confident. She drew a princess with a small crown, a smiling friend beside her, and a world full of color. For the first time, her lips twitched upward. It was almost imperceptible, but it was a start. Then, just as the dad began to feel a flicker of hope, disaster struck. A librarian approached, frowning. "Excuse me, sir," she said sternly. "You can't have children running around with sketchpads here. It's against library rules." The dad swallowed hard. We're just helping them draw. It's quiet. I promise we're not disturbing anyone." "I'm sorry," the librarian said firmly. "Rules are rules." Panic flashed across the little girl's face. She looked at the dad, eyes wide, almost on the verge of tears. This wasn't just a disruption. To her, it felt like rejection, like the world was shutting her out again. The dad knew this could ruin everything they had built so far. One false move, one rule, and the fragile trust this child had begun to place in them could vanish in an instant. "Wait," he said softly, kneeling. "It's okay. We're going to stay right here. Let's just finish our drawing. You can show me when no one is looking." The girl nodded hesitantly, pencil moving again. Slowly, cautiously, the princess she was drawing began to smile. And with each stroke, the dad felt a warmth spread through his chest. This was harder than any challenge they had faced, but the reward, he realized, was immeasurable. By the time they left the library, the girl was smiling, not fully, but enough that her eyes no longer seemed hollow. She clutched the finished drawing tightly, as if it were the most precious thing in the world. Outside, the little daughter turned to him. "Daddy, we did it. She's happy now." He nodded, his throat tight. Yes, but she needed more than just a drawing. She needed someone to see her, really see her, and not walk away. The dad realized then that helping someone wasn't always easy or immediate. Some princesses were harder to reach, some hearts more fragile. But that didn't mean they couldn't be saved. Sometimes it took patience, persistence, and courage. As they walked home, the city bustling around them, the dad felt a surge of determination. Tomorrow they would continue. They would find more princesses, more children who needed a little light in their lives. And no matter how difficult it got, they wouldn't give up. Because they had discovered something extraordinary. Even a single dad and his little girl, armed with pencils, paper, and a heart willing to care, could change the world, one princess at a time. And somewhere in the city, another child was waiting, just around the corner, ready to teach them the next lesson in courage, hope, and love. White heavy checkmark section 4 highlights. The next morning, the little girl shook him awake again, her excitement impossible to ignore.
"Daddy,
"Today is the day. I can feel it. We'll find the princess who really needs us the most." He smiled, rubbing his eyes. "All right, lead the way, Your Majesty." She giggled, bouncing ahead of him as they walked through the quiet streets, pencils and sketchpad tucked safely into her tiny backpack. The city was waking up, people hurrying to work, cars honking in the distance, but to them, nothing else existed except the mission, to make one more princess truly happy. They arrived at a small playground tucked behind a row of apartment buildings. It was mostly empty, except for a girl sitting on a swing, her legs barely reaching the ground. She hugged herself, staring at the sand with a sadness that seemed to radiate outward, filling the empty air around her. The little girl grabbed her father's hand. "That's her, Daddy. She's the one." The dad knelt beside his daughter.
all right."
"Let's be gentle. We don't want to scare her." They approached slowly. "Hi there," he said softly. "We're drawing princesses today. Would you like to join us?" The girl didn't look up. She shook her head slightly, but the movement was subtle, almost imperceptible. Her body was tense, rigid, as though any small gesture could make her disappear entirely. The dad sighed softly. He'd seen this before, the children who had built walls so high that even kindness felt like a threat. But he knew something crucial. Sometimes, the tiniest spark could reach the deepest heart. "Would you like to watch us draw?" he asked instead. "No pressure. Just look if you want." The little girl's eyes flickered up, hesitant but curious. The dad handed a pencil to his own daughter, who immediately began sketching, talking quietly as she worked.
"See?
The princess needed a friend. And we helped her smile again." Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the girl on the swing inched closer. The dad felt a surge of hope. Sometimes, just being patient was enough. Just being present. Minutes passed. The girl finally reached for a pencil, her fingers trembling as she held it. She drew slowly, carefully, each line deliberate. A princess appeared, small and fragile, standing alone at first, but then a figure appeared beside her, a friend, holding out a hand. The dad and his daughter exchanged a glance. They had done it. The moment of transformation had come. When the girl finally looked up, her eyes met theirs. There was a flicker of something new, trust, relief, and maybe even hope. She clutched the drawing to her chest. She's happy, she whispered. Yes, the dad said, his voice thick. She really is. The little girl hugged him tightly, jumping up and down. We did it, Daddy. We made her happy. Around them, the playground seemed to glow with a different energy. Birds chirped, the wind rustled through the trees, and the city noises faded into the background. For that moment, nothing else mattered except the joy on a child's face. The dad realized something profound. This mission wasn't about him. It wasn't about being a hero. It was about showing up consistently, patiently, with a heart willing to care. That was the kind of magic that changed lives. As they packed up their sketch pads to leave, the girl on the swing ran over to them.
Thank you, she said simply.
Her voice was quiet, but it carried a weight that made the dad's chest ache. I haven't smiled like this in a long time. His daughter smiled brightly.
See?
That's why we do it. Everyone deserves a little happiness. The dad nodded, tears prickling at the corners of his eyes. He knelt and handed the girl an extra set of colored pencils.
Keep drawing, he said.
Keep making your princess happy. And remember, it's okay to let people help you when you need it. The girl nodded, clutching the pencils like a treasure. And as they walked away, hand in hand, the dad realized the most incredible truth. Sometimes, changing the world didn't require money, fame, or power. It only required presence, empathy, and the courage to care deeply. On the walk home, his little girl yawned, resting her head against his shoulder. Daddy, do you think we helped enough princesses today? He smiled down at her. We helped all the ones we could today. And tomorrow we'll help more. And as the city hummed around them, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Real hope, born from small acts of love, patience, and persistence. Because he knew now that even a single dad and his little girl, armed with nothing but pencils, paper, and hearts full of kindness, could make a difference. One princess at a time. And maybe, just maybe, they could change the world.